Rachel caught her neighbor's hidden camera filming her kids on their own trampoline, only to be hit with bogus HOA warnings days later. Karen, the smug enforcer behind it all, used the rulebook like a weapon to bully families into silence. But one night, a security feed revealed the one thing Karen never saw coming, her own mountain of violations. And just wait until you see how it all unraveled and why justice, in the end, snapped back perfectly in place. Rachel had just set down her coffee when she noticed something flicker near the back hedge, barely visible between two clusters of boxwood that divided her backyard from the neighbors. At first, she thought it was just the reflection of sunlight on glass. But then she saw it again. A tiny, blinking red light, steady and deliberate. Her stomach knotted. She stepped off the porch, crossed the patio, and squinted at the hedge. That's when she saw it. Wedged between the branches, half camouflaged by leaves, was a small security camera. Its lens pointed directly at her backyard. More specifically, right at the trampoline where her 10-year-old twins, Mason and Lily, were jumping and laughing, completely unaware. Rachel's first instinct wasn't outrage. It was confusion. Who puts a camera in a bush facing someone else's yard? She stood frozen for a moment, then slowly turned toward the house next door. And there she was, Karen, sitting comfortably on her elevated patio with a glass of iced tea, sunglasses on, and that look. The one that wasn't quite a smile, but more of a smirk stretched too wide. The one Rachel had seen before, the time Karen reported her for clutter when she left the kids' tricycles out overnight. Or when she cited her for a flagstone border that was non-standard landscaping. Karen raised her glass in mock greeting, like this was just another sunny afternoon in the neighborhood. Rachel's pulse picked up as she approached the fence that separated their yards. "Karen," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady, "why is there a camera pointed at my kids?" Karen didn't flinch. "Oh, that? It's just for security," she said sweetly. "You know how things are these days. You can never be too careful." Rachel blinked. "It's aimed at my yard." Karen's expression didn't change. "I have a right to monitor the property line. It's within HOA regulations." "No, it's aimed at the trampoline, at my children." A pause. Then Karen leaned forward slightly, voice dropping an octave. "Rachel, if you're worried about how your property looks on camera, maybe it's time to revisit those trampoline placement guidelines. No, in the HOA handbook. And while we're at it, unattended children, that's not really safe either." The words hit Rachel like a slap wrapped in velvet. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came. Karen was smiling again to Inich, that knowing, insufferable, smug expression that said, "You can't touch me." Later that night, Rachel replayed the conversation in her head a dozen times. She felt something deeper than anger, a chill, because this wasn't just a neighbor being overcautious. This wasn't about safety or community well-being. It was about control. Karen had found a way to police not just yards or paint colors, but people, their privacy, their children. And worst of all, she had found a way to make it all seem perfectly reasonable. If Rachel thought the hidden camera was the end of it, she was wrong. It was only the beginning. Within days, the first letter came, tucked into their mailbox in an envelope stamped with the HOA seal and signed in the same looping handwriting Karen always used for block party flyers and holiday event notices. But this time, it wasn't festive. It was a formal warning. Unsupervised children observed outdoors for extended periods of time. Rachel stared at it in disbelief. Her children were in their own backyard, behind a locked fence, under the casual, half-watchful eye of their mother, just feet away through the kitchen window. The next day, a second letter arrived. This one accused them of excessive noise during non-recreational hours, a bureaucratic euphemism, apparently, for kids laughing on a weekend afternoon. By the end of the week, there were 3 more violations. One for visible recreational equipment from the street, the trampoline. One for failure to submit trampoline installation plans for architectural review, and another vague warning about patterns of disregard for HOA ordinances. Rachel felt it in her bones now. This wasn't coincidence. It was personal. She tried to speak with Karen calmly, twice. Once at the mailbox, and once when they crossed paths on the sidewalk. Both times, she was met with the same dispassionate gaze and carefully rehearsed lines. Karen spoke as if reading from a script, always citing rules, always masking intent with a thin layer of HOA language. "We all agreed to the same covenants," she'd say with a shrug. "It's about maintaining standards." Then, with a look that chilled Rachel more than any rulebook ever could, "If you're not happy here, maybe this isn't the neighborhood for you." Rachel didn't answer that time. She simply walked away, jaw clenched. But inside, something shifted. Resentment crystallized into something harder, colder. Their kids started asking questions soon after. Mason stopped bouncing on the trampoline. Lily didn't want to go outside without Rachel. "Is the camera lady mad at us?" she asked, hugging her stuffed otter. Rachel's heart ached, but she stayed composed. "No, sweetheart," she said. "She just doesn't understand how families work." David, however, was done pretending. One night, after yet another passive-aggressive HOA bulletin from Karen arrived, this time about yard aesthetics and community harmony, David began setting up their new home security system. He'd bought it partly out of concern, partly out of principle. If someone was going to watch their family, then they deserved to see who was watching back. As he calibrated the backyard camera and linked it to the app, something caught his eye. Their camera, installed higher for better coverage, captured a clear angle that included not just their yard, but a portion of Karen's elevated patio and the slope behind it. And in that narrow field of view, a few details emerged. The camera Karen had installed wasn't perched at ground level. It was angled downward from well above the fence line, mounted on a pole that extended from a beam of her back deck. An unapproved extension, according to the HOA building codes David had read obsessively in the past few days. And behind that, a pile of discarded lumber and black trash bags stacked near what looked like a runoff channel. David zoomed in, clicked pause, and stared. Karen hadn't just been watching them. She'd exposed herself, and her property, to scrutiny she hadn't anticipated. He called Rachel into the room. "What am I looking at?" she asked, brows furrowed. David didn't answer immediately. He just leaned back, nodded toward the screen, and said, "Her camera saw our yard. Ours saw something better." And for the first time in a week, Rachel felt the faintest flicker of control returning to her chest. David couldn't sleep that night. After everyone else had gone to bed, he sat alone in the living room with the soft hum of the security monitor and the eerie stillness of the backyard glowing faintly in infrared light. Something about the way Karen's deck jutted over the fence line had been bothering him, so he opened the footage again. He rewound, slowed it down, zoomed in, and there it was, undeniable now. Karen's wooden deck wasn't just an eyesore, it was completely out of compliance. It extended far beyond the original blueprints they'd seen when the HOA formed. There were no visible structural supports underneath the platform. Worse, it hung over the back of the property, where the neighborhood's protected runoff system snaked through the easement behind the homes. David recognized the area. Stormwater wasn't supposed to be blocked, covered, or contaminated in any way. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Nestled in the corner of her private retreat, partially obscured by a sun umbrella and fake ficus plants, was a round above-ground hot tub, unpermitted, unregistered, and sitting directly on what looked like a patch of bare soil. Cords and tubing ran haphazardly toward the side of her house. It was the kind of setup you'd expect from a weekend DIY project, not from someone who held herself up as the standard bearer for neighborhood decorum. Then Rachel came in, rubbing her eyes. "You're still up?" "Come here," David said. He played the footage again, paused it. Rachel leaned in and looked. Her eyes narrowed. "What are those?" she asked, pointing just behind the deck. Trash bags, at least 6 of them, tucked in the corner where their fences nearly met. Bags that definitely hadn't come from their side of the yard. "That's the storm easement," she said, voice tight. They pulled up the HOA zoning documents from the community portal, took screenshots, measured footage using Google Earth. Then they cross-referenced everything with city building codes. By 2:30 a.m., they had confirmed it. Karen's entire deck violated at least 4 specific HOA ordinances. She had no visible supports. Her deck extended beyond the setback line. The hot tub lacked permits. And those trash bags? Dumping near a waterway was a clear municipal infraction. Rachel stared at the laptop in silence. Then, very quietly, she said, "She went after our kids." David nodded once, slow and focused. She picked the wrong family. The next morning, they filed a formal complaint anonymously through the HOA's online portal. They attached labeled images, screenshots, ordinance references, and coordinates. Then they did the same on the City Building Department's website under the section marked Anonymous Property Violation Tip Line. But they didn't send the footage. Not yet. That, they agreed, was the card you play only when the game calls for it. For a few days, things were quiet. No new warnings, no camera adjustments. Rachel began to hope maybe Karen was starting to sense the shift in energy. Maybe something had gotten through. Then another letter arrived. This one accused them of violating HOA Guideline 17C, noise-producing ornamental items. Translation, a wind chime. Rachel had hung it outside the kitchen window. It was a gift from her mother, gentle, soft-toned, and barely audible over a breeze. David didn't say anything. He simply walked to his office, opened his laptop, pulled up the clearest shot from their security system, the one where Karen's deck, trash bags, and hot tub were all visible under morning light, and attached it to an email. Subject line, concern about a member of the HOA Enforcement Committee. And this time, he signed it with his full name. It didn't happen with a bang. It came with a clipboard and a knock on the door at 7:14 a.m. Karen, usually up early to patrol for recycling violations and garden hose offenses, hadn't expected anyone that morning. She opened the door in a thick robe and a hurried expression, only to find 2 city code inspectors, 1 HOA board member, and a folder. Her name had come up during a routine compliance sweep, they explained, several times. The city had received detailed documentation regarding zoning violations, unpermitted construction, and improper waste disposal within a protected easement. The HOA board had been looped in, and given her role on the enforcement committee, a full review was now necessary. What followed was a 2-hour walkthrough of Karen's property, from her oversized deck to the exposed electrical cords of the unregistered hot tub to the trash bags behind the fence that were slowly leaking into a drainage path. Karen did what Karen always did. She tried to assert authority. She cited bylaws, made vague references to grandfathered clauses, even pulled out her phone to scroll through old emails she claimed would exonerate her. But then they showed her the photographs. High-resolution stills, date-stamped, angle-perfect, captured from Rachel and David's newly installed security camera, the one Karen had never noticed, or perhaps assumed couldn't see over the fence. In one frame, her hot tub plugged into a patio outlet with exposed wires. In another, the warped base of her deck, hovering without support over the drainage line. In a third, bags of yard waste dumped across property lines, inches from the municipal runoff area. And just like that, the script flipped. Karen went pale. She stopped talking. Her eyes scanned the photos with a frozen sort of panic, the kind of expression people wear when they realize the rules they've weaponized against others have just turned on them. By the end of the day, a formal motion had been introduced to the HOA board, removal of Karen from the enforcement committee due to conflict of interest and gross non-compliance. The vote was unanimous. No discussion. The city issued citations totaling over $3,000. She was ordered to dismantle the deck entirely, remove the hot tub, and arrange a proper waste disposal service for what she'd left near the easement. A deadline was set, inspections scheduled, and the camera that had once stared into Rachel's yard like an unblinking threat, it vanished overnight. No apology ever came, no knock on the door. But the silence itself was enough. Rachel didn't celebrate. There were no Facebook posts, no gloating group texts to the neighbors. She simply made pancakes Saturday morning, then watched through the kitchen window as her kids ran outside, laughing, barefoot, and free. They bounced on the trampoline under a blue sky, hair flying, arms raised, untouched by the drama that had surrounded them for weeks. And Rachel stood there, coffee in hand, feeling something shift in her chest. Not a triumphant high, not revenge-driven joy. Something steadier, something earned. It wasn't about beating Karen. It was about restoring something that had quietly been taken. Peace, safety, the right to enjoy your own backyard without feeling like you were on trial. And as the wind caught the soft clink of her mother's wind chime by the window, Rachel smiled, just once. Not loud, not smug, just satisfied that someone who tried so hard to control everyone else was finally held to the standards she thought she was above, by her own rules, by her own camera.